So I used to bring the envelopes home because I didn't have time to do it. And I had 3 sons, right? Dave was still a baby. He was the one I used to take to work crawling. And the 2 older boys. I think Jay was about 6 and Taj was about 3, right? And I said, right, pocket money, right? These are the flyers, all right? One of you fold, the other one put in the envelope and seal them. So Dave came along and wanted to do it. And they said, no, go away, right? They kept pushing him off, right? Get a phone from Christine Jolly. It was a good friend. Christine said, hi, Leela, how are you? I said, oh, I'm really well, thank you. How are you? She said, really good. She said, oh, I got the envelope from the CAV, right? CAV letterhead and all that. And I said, oh, that's great. I hope you can come. It's like an invitation to a seminar or something, right? She said, well, when I opened it, there was a piece of paper in it, but it had like squiggles on it, right? And I thought, oh, this is odd. So I just thought maybe one of your children might have put it in by mistake. So what had happened was the 2 older boys pushing Dave out of the way. So he had got one of his things written, drawn, squiggles on it, found an envelope, happened to be Christine Jolly's with a name on it, and sealed the envelope and put it in the pile. So Christine Jolly got this squiggle.
She would have
My son.
Everything full stop. So if you reflect on then also what that meant for a careers practitioner in a school, what I used to do, I would go in and take the youngest child with me. I would go in at the weekend to do the mail. It was really, because you would have, you know, if you think about the universities that would be mailing out, because nothing at that stage had become electronic. So if you look at, I finished in schools in 2004 would have been my last year in a school. And even then, there was very little that came to you electronically. It was the big mail out. So the poor practitioner, and, you know, we had tiny little mailboxes, pigeonholes. So you just knew you had to clear it every day. But that was the administrative responsibility burden. I used to pay them myself. Sometimes I'd get students, you know, year 11s or whatever, and say, oh, do you want, and can you do, and so you'd have, I don't know whether it's the same today, but you'd have huge racks, pamphlets.
They still have them.
Yeah. So, and again, that would be something that school admin would never have thought to say in my time, oh, would you like some admin assistance? Yeah. And yet they would have known the pile of information that was coming in.
I think careers practitioners, the hours they worked was humongous, absolutely. Yes. And especially during the results came out, and so you'd come in the school holidays, you'd open your office, you'd be counselling the students when the results came out. Firstly, when the BTEC results came out, you'd be there.
Yes.
And then, of course, you'd be there. And you never got compensated for it. Not that we asked for compensation, we just did it because we loved the job.
I can remember missing a work Christmas break-up that was held in the school because it was the day the results came out. And, you know, afterwards people said, oh, where were you, Carmel? And I said, well, I had all these students coming into the area. It was a bit like I would try and ensure that one day a week I would get to the staff room for morning tea, even if it was only to make myself a cup of tea, say hello and come back out, because that's when students were free to see you. So the seniors might have had a free period, whatever, but Year 10's program was full. So if they wanted to see you, it had to be at lunchtime, or it had to be at recess, or, you know, if they were willing to stay after school. So you didn't have that time with your colleagues in the school either. It was just a very different role, and a role that, for the best will in the world, I don't think anyone really understood in the school. And that was hence the importance of the conferences, the networks, the CEAV itself. They were your lifelines.
Absolutely. And you've made really good friends too.
Yes.
When I look back now, I'm still in touch with a lot of those people that I met at conferences and so on. I see them I go to the Lee Street Market and somebody there that I know from somewhere else, you know, from careers. It's a very strong sorority, fraternity, whatever you call it. I think the collegiality was very strong, mainly because they were isolated in schools.
Yes. Yes.
So therefore you reached out to your colleagues and everyone really helped each other. And you also made really strong networks and relationships with people like school liaison officers and
Yes.
selection officers at various universities and so on. So you're almost like on first name basis, and you could ring in and plead a case on one of your students or seek advice from them. Look, the student's been really ill, blah, blah, blah. What can we do? So, and they listen to you. So I think careers role was really a rewarding role. I think of all the roles I've done in the school, that was the most rewarding role for me.
And the other thing is the very personal relationship, by and large, that you were able to develop with individual students who would come to you. So you got to know them outside of what they were necessarily like as a student. That interest-based, for example, interests, hobbies. And so for me, that then meant that I was much better 15, 20 years down the track. If I encountered somebody, I'd be able to go, oh yes, that's right, you were really interested in such and such. I had one student and all she wanted, would you believe, work, it would have been work experience. I want to work with a hat maker. Oh, okay, hat maker, milliner. Yeah, oh, that's going to be a bit tricky in Ballarat. And as fate would happen, I was at the GP and the magazines were there and I was waiting and I was flicking through this magazine and here was a feature, forgotten her first name now, but somebody McDonald. And she was a cartographer. That was her profession. She went to London and she decided to do a night school class of millinery. And the long and the short of it is she ended up being employed at the BBC doing some of the period costumes, their hats, including there was one, you're too young, Amelia, but about sisters in the 1930s, House of Elliot it was called.
Elias.
Anyway, so I'm reading this, oh my goodness, this woman, this is an amazing story. So I thought, okay, and I tracked her down and she had this lovely little room in the Manchester Unity building in the city. So I phoned her up and she said, oh, that's most unusual. I've never, now what's work experience? I explained that. Oh, well, yes, okay. Now, just tell her it's going to be very busy because it's getting toward Melbourne Cup season. And so that, I then saw that student, I was like, oh, yes. She didn't end up being a milliner, but you had that lovely personal insight into young people, and yeah, it was good.
And it's really interesting. A couple of things I want to say. I remember going up to one of the regional schools. I think it was Ballarat High, one of those schools. We were bringing in a new, I think with my career portfolio, we wanted to try it on some of the students, right? And so Steph, one of my colleagues from work, and I were walking around this group of students when they're doing this particular exercise, and we had this one girl and one boy who didn't know each other, both totally disengaged. So I went up to talk to her and to the girl and find out, how she's going and everything else, and just had to answer like, who am I, what am I interested in, those sort of questions. And she said, oh, no, I'm not interested in anything, can't do anything, that nah sort of response, right? And I found out later that she has alopecia and she not been in school for a while. Then I said, look, what do you like doing? What do you do the weekends? And she said, oh, I go to op shops and I find old clothes and I do them up. And I said, hey, that's interesting. That's really amazing. People are after those sorts of things. So you can actually do this and then set them up on your website, And all of a sudden, she was apparently a very good needle person, right, needlewood, and loved doing that. So and I said, vintage clothes, do you know how expensive they are? There's a market for it, right? So it's just talking to some, and this is where I think a careers practitioner has got that, if you're asking the right question, teasing out what they're interested in, bringing them. Like, in some kids it's easier, others it's harder.
Yes.
Then there's this other boy sitting there totally disengaged, mucking around. So I go up and sit down, mother of 3 sons, I can handle this boy, ha ha. what do you do the weekends? Nothing. What are you interested in? Nothing. Come on, there must be something you like doing. He said, oh, yeah. I said, what? I help my neighbour to mow the lawn or whatever it was. I said, hey, that's good. What, do you enjoy doing it? Nah. Well, why are you doing it? Oh, I need the money. And I said, why do you need the money? Because I buy shares. And I said, what do you mean you buy shares? Oh, I play the share market. I just fell off my chair. Here's this boy who just wasn't interested in anything at school, but knew all about the share market, was playing shares. I said, you make money? I said, oh, yeah. I mean, it was just incredible, year 9 kid. So it's teasing, and unfortunately, we don't have time in school to do that, with those sort of students, and sort of tease it out of them. Absolutely. And that's just why I love Greg Pennell, the Canadian. I think of all, one of the things that I find most satisfying in my job when I was in the department was finding out the really good speakers, bringing them out and doing professional learning for careers practitioners. So bringing out people like Tony Watts and so on. Then I came across Gray Pennell, who's from Canada. Gray is an Inuit, part Inuit. And actually he's Métis. It's a different type of Indigenous Canadian. And he had a fairly poor upbringing, which he talks about. And he talks about, his name is Gray, the teacher making him stand at the back of the classroom because he spelled his name Gray. And he said, no, how do you spell Gray? Grey? And he said, no, it's Gray. Of course, he was right. But anyway, Gray talks about the strength-based approach to career education. And it was just so powerful. So for all the PD that I've run for careers practitioners, he's always rated the socks off anyone.
Right.
And he just says, don't focus on the weaknesses, focus on the strengths. And he talks about his 2 daughters. He's got 2 daughters. And I hope Gray doesn't mind me talking about this. But one of his daughters, all she wanted to do was teach kindergarten, right? And preschoolers. All she wanted to do was that. But she didn't like maths. She wasn't very good at maths, right? But she really, really liked teaching. She's terrific with young kids. So Gray thought about it for a while and thought, hang on, why would she need to do like algorithms and all these high-level maths if she wants to teach kindergarten, right? So he went to one of the colleges, whatever, and prosecuted that argument. And she got in, and she's still the kindergarten teacher, and she's happy as Larry. And he's so right. Horses for courses, for God's sake. Why would you need to learn the highest level maths if you want to be a kindergarten teacher? I can talk from different perspectives. I actually, when I was working at the CUV, as the extension officer, executive officer, the extension education officer, one of my jobs was actually getting articles for the journal and getting it ready to go out to the printers, and then picking them up from the printers, bringing them back, and then mailing them out, so start to finish. I think it's a really vital resource for careers practitioners. You talked about, from the professional perspective, learning about new things that's happening. It's an opportunity for the association to communicate to its members, making sure the members are at the cutting edge of new research and new thinking in careers. So it's a really good communication tool, works both ways. What I like about the journal too is it gives careers practitioners an opportunity to sort of write about themselves as well. So where you've got good examples of good practice, it's an opportunity for us to sort of share those examples widely amongst the community of careers practitioners. And I think that's a really important part of the journal. So I hope the journal continues the wonderful work that it's doing. I think that's a really critical part.
And look, I'd echo what Leela has said. I think, so there was the content in terms of professional learning, articles about good practice, whatever. But it was also wonderful to then be able to follow up with a person, wherever. And sometimes I would, when I was in a school, I'd put in a request for my professional learning that I go and visit somebody to see what they were doing. I'd read about what they were doing in the journal, and then you think, oh, that would be really good to go and see that in operation. So I think that was something I really looked forward to. I think also to know that there was somebody who had your back in terms of policy and advocacy, that often you can know what might be needed, but you can't do it on your own. So I think, and that's maybe more the association as well, but to be kept abreast of policy, because I have always liked policy. So it's not just the practice, the policy and funding. So it was always really valuable to me to know that there were people behind our scenes working on policy, and then that moving into things like, structured workplace learning, work experience. I just think that's critical to support a group in their professional learning and their day-to-day practices.
I agree totally. So when you're at the coalface in your classrooms, dealing with the day-to-day minutiae of teaching, you lose track of what's happening outside your bubble. Sure, you go to meetings and stuff like that. So I think what the journal does is that professionalization of the workforce. So people can't just keep going to seminars and whatever not. So that you're actually bringing it to their office, you're bringing it to them through the journal. And sometimes there could be like little teasers that says, yep, look, I've read this little article by Tony Watts or whatever. I want to find out more. It gets them thinking about, change of practice or enriching what they're doing with students.